In a small, sleepy town where everyone knew each other's business, there lived a young woman who stood out not because she was extraordinary in the eyes of her neighbors, but because of what she did every single day. Her name wasn't important. To most people, they just called her that girl who runs all the time. Every morning, long before the sun peeked over the horizon, and while most folks were still tucked in their beds or sipping their first cup of tea, she could be found, jogging around the local park. Her routine never changed. She'd start with a slow jog, warming up as the cool air nipped at her cheeks. Then came the real work sprints across the open field, push-ups on the damp grass, pull-ups using the rusty playground bars, and even makeshift weightlifting exercises with rocks and logs she found scattered nearby. It was clear she wasn't doing this casually. Every movement was precise, deliberate, almost like she had a plan no one else understood. But here's the thing, no one really understood why she did it. The townsfolk would sit on their porches or chat over fences, shaking their heads whenever they spotted her. "What's the point?" they'd ask each other. "Who trains alone like that? Doesn't she know you need a coach, a team, some kind of support?" They didn't get it. To them, her efforts seemed pointless, maybe even laughable. And laugh they did. Not always openly, mind you, but enough for her to hear snickers when she passed by. Some kids once shouted "Lone Wolf" as she ran past them, giggling amongst themselves. A few older men sitting outside the cafe muttered things like, "She thinks she's going to be an athlete? Good luck with that." Even some of the women, who might have otherwise been supportive, whispered behind her back, saying things like, "Poor thing. She doesn't realize how far behind she is." Despite all the negativity, she never let it show on her face. If anything, she looked more determined than ever. What these people didn't know and probably wouldn't care about if they did was that deep inside, she carried a dream bigger than their judgmental words. Ever since she was little, she'd watched videos of Olympic races late at night, mesmerized by the speed, the power, the glory of crossing the finish line first. That dream stayed with her, growing stronger year after year, even though life hadn't exactly handed her opportunities on a silver platter to the rest of the town. Her dream might have sounded ridiculous. After all, she didn't come from money, didn't have access to fancy gyms or professional trainers. But none of that mattered to her. She believed in herself, even when others didn't, and honestly, sometimes she felt lonely. Training alone wasn't easy. There were days when the silence felt deafening, when the lack of encouragement weighed heavily on her shoulders. Yet, she kept going, driven by something only she could feel, a burning desire to prove not just to the world, but to herself that she was capable of greatness. One chilly morning, as she finished her usual routine, she stopped near the edge of the park to catch her breath. The laughter and whispers echoed faintly in her mind, making her clench her fists tightly. For a brief moment, doubt crept in. Was she wasting her time? Would all her hard work amount to nothing? Just then, an elderly man walking his dog approached her. He must have noticed the frustration written on her face because he paused and said gently, "You remind me of myself when I was younger." Curious, she looked up at him, her brow furrowed. He went on to explain that he used to box in his youth, facing similar ridicule from people who thought he'd never make it. "Here's the thing," he added, patting his dog's head, "dreams don't care what anyone else thinks. Only you can decide whether they're worth fighting for." Those words hit her like a lightning bolt. From that day forward, she made a promise to herself. She wouldn't let anyone's opinion dim her fire. Instead, she'd use it to fuel her determination. She started setting goals, tracking her progress meticulously, and pushing herself harder than ever before. Each drop of sweat, each blistered hand, and each ache in her muscles became a testament to her unwavering willpower. As weeks turned into months, something remarkable began to happen. While the townsfolk continued to mock her, they couldn't ignore the fact that she was getting faster, stronger, and sharper. Still, they dismissed it as beginner's luck or mere coincidence. Little did they know she was preparing for something much bigger, a chance to silence them all, not with words, but with action. This was just the beginning of her journey, but already she was proving that being underestimated could be the greatest advantage of all. Months passed, and the young woman's journey was far from easy. Sure, she had made progress, her legs were stronger, her endurance had improved, and her speed was faster than ever before, but it wasn't just physical challenges that tested her resolve. The mental toll of training alone was something she hadn't fully anticipated. There were days when the loneliness felt suffocating, like a heavy cloud hanging over her head. No teammates to cheer her on, no coach to guide her through tough moments, and definitely no one in her town who truly believed in her dream. One particularly grueling morning, she pushed herself harder than usual during her workout. She ran lap after lap around the park, trying to beat her personal best time. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shave off those precious seconds. Frustration bubbled inside her as she finally stopped, gasping for air, her legs trembling with exhaustion. She sat down on the grass, staring at the ground, feeling utterly defeated. Her mind replayed every snicker, every mocking comment she'd heard from the townsfolk. Why am I even doing this? She thought bitterly. What's the point if no one believes in me? For the first time in a long while, tears welled up in her eyes. She wiped them away quickly, ashamed of letting herself feel weak. Sitting there under the pale morning sky, she wondered if maybe they were right. Maybe she was wasting her time. Maybe dreams like hers weren't meant for someone from a small town with no resources or connections. Just as these thoughts threatened to overwhelm her, an unexpected voice broke through the silence. "Hey," came a gentle call. Startled, she looked up to see an elderly man standing nearby, holding the leash of a scruffy little dog. He had kind eyes and a warm smile, and though she recognized him from his daily walks in the park, they had never spoken before. Embarrassed by her tear-streaked face, she quickly tried to compose herself, but he didn't seem fazed. Instead, he sat down beside her, his dog wagging its tail happily. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders," he said casually, glancing at her. When she didn't respond, he continued, "I've seen you out here every day, working harder than anyone else I know. What's got you so down today?" She hesitated, unsure whether to open up to a stranger. But something about his calm demeanor put her at ease. After a moment, she admitted softly, "I'm just tired. Tired of failing, tired of being laughed at, tired of not knowing if any of this is worth it." The old man nodded slowly, as if he understood exactly what she was going through. "You know," he began, "when I was younger, I used to box. Not professionally or anything fancy, but I loved it. People told me I'd never amount to anything in the ring. They said I was too scrawny, too slow, too everything. And you know what? For a while, I almost believed them." Curious despite herself, she asked, "What changed?" He chuckled, scratching his dog behind the ears. "One day, I realized something important. Their opinions didn't define me. Only I could decide whether my dreams were worth fighting for. So I kept training, kept pushing myself, even when no one else believed in me. And guess what? Eventually, I proved them wrong, not because I became some big champion, but because I proved it to myself." His words struck a chord deep within her. She had spent so much energy worrying about what others thought, letting their negativity seep into her confidence. But now, hearing this man's story, she realized something profound. She didn't need validation from anyone else. All that mattered was her belief in herself. From that day forward, she approached her training with renewed determination. Every doubt, every insult, every mocking laugh became fuel for her fire. She started setting specific goals for herself, not just vague ideas of improvement, but measurable targets she could work toward. She wrote them down in a notebook, tracking her progress meticulously. Each small victory, a faster sprint, a longer distance, a better form, became proof that she was moving closer to her dream. To keep herself motivated, she began visualizing success. During her runs, she imagined crossing the finish line first, hearing the roar of the crowd, feeling the weight of a medal around her neck. These mental images gave her strength on the hardest days, reminding her why she started this journey. In the first place, she also developed rituals to celebrate her achievements, no matter how small. After beating her personal best time, she treated herself to her favorite snack. After mastering a new technique, she allowed herself a rare evening off to relax. These little rewards helped her stay positive and focused, but perhaps the most transformative change was in her mindset. She stopped seeing failure as something to fear and started viewing it as part of the process. Every setback taught her something valuable, whether it was adjusting her pace, improving her breathing technique, or simply learning to listen to her body. Slowly but surely, she grew not just physically stronger, but mentally tougher as well. Word of her relentless efforts eventually reached a few people in the town, though reactions varied. Some still dismissed her as delusional, convinced she was chasing an impossible dream. Others, however, began to take notice. A local shopkeeper who often saw her pass by in the morning started leaving bottles of water outside his store for her, along with encouraging notes taped to the bottles. A teenager who had once teased her now watched her workouts from afar, intrigued by her discipline. Even the old boxer occasionally joined her at the park, offering tips and sharing stories from his own experiences. Despite these small gestures of support, she remained fiercely independent. She knew that ultimately this was her battle to fight. And while she appreciated the kindness, she also understood that proving herself wasn't about winning others' approval, it was about staying true to her vision, no matter how lonely the road might be. As the weeks turned into months, her transformation became undeniable. Her strides were longer, her movements more fluid, her confidence unshakable. Those who had once laughed at her began to whisper among themselves, wondering if maybe, just maybe, she was onto something, but she paid them no mind. She had bigger things to focus on now, a goal that burned brighter than ever in her heart. This was more than just training. It was preparation for the biggest challenge of her life. Somewhere deep inside, she knew she was ready. The question was, would the world be ready for her? Months of relentless effort finally paid off when the young woman qualified for the regional trials. It wasn't an easy journey to get there. She had to compete in smaller local events, battling not just seasoned athletes but also her own nerves. The first few races were tough. She stumbled during one, got overtaken at the last second in another, and barely scraped through a third. But each race taught her something new, how to pace herself better, how to stay calm under pressure, and most importantly, how to dig deep when her body screamed at her to stop. When she crossed the finish line of that final qualifying race in second place, earning her spot in the regional trials, she felt a wave of emotions she couldn't quite describe. Relief, pride, disbelief. They all swirled together as she stood catching her breath, the cheers of the small crowd ringing in her ears. For the first time, people weren't laughing at her. Instead, they were clapping, some even shouting encouragement. It was a strange feeling, almost surreal, but it didn't make her lose focus. She knew this was just the beginning. News of her qualification spread quickly through her town, though reactions were mixed. Some folks still doubted her chances. Sure, she made it to the trials, they muttered. But what's she going to do against real competitors? This isn't some backyard race. Others, however, began to soften their stance. The shopkeeper who left water bottles for her now added handwritten notes saying things like, "Show them what you're made of." Even the teenagers who used to call her Lone Wolf started watching her practice sessions more closely, whispering among themselves about how fast she'd gotten. Despite the growing buzz, she stayed grounded. Qualifying for the trials was a huge milestone, but she knew the road ahead would be even tougher. These weren't local amateurs she'd be racing against. These were athletes with years of experience, access to top-notch training facilities, and coaches who analyzed every detail of their performance. She didn't have any of that. All she had was her determination and the lessons she'd learned from months of solitary training. The day of the regional trials arrived sooner than she expected. She woke up early, her stomach fluttering with nerves. As she laced up her worn-out running shoes and pulled on her plain tracksuit, the same one she'd trained in for years, she reminded herself why she was here. This wasn't about proving anything to anyone else. It was about proving it to herself. The venue was unlike anything she'd seen before. A proper track stadium with gleaming stands, electronic timing boards, and officials bustling around with clipboards. Athletes warmed up on the field, stretching and chatting with their coaches. Sponsor logos adorned their uniforms, and many of them carried an air of confidence that came from knowing they belonged there. In contrast, she looked out of place, no fancy gear, no entourage. Just her and her quiet resolve. As she walked onto the track for her event, she could feel eyes on her. Some stared curiously, others dismissively. A few snickered when they saw her plain outfit, assuming she didn't stand a chance, but she blocked it all out. Her mind was focused on one thing, the race ahead. When the starting gun fired, adrenaline surged through her veins. She exploded off the line, matching strides with the other runners. The first lap was fast, faster than she'd anticipated, but she stuck to her plan. She stayed near the middle of the pack, conserving energy while keeping an eye on the leaders. Around her, the crowd roared, cheering for their favorites, but she tuned it all out. The only sound she heard was the rhythm of her breathing and the pounding of her feet against the track. By the halfway mark, fatigue began to creep in. Her legs burned, her lungs ached, and doubt whispered in the back of her mind. "You can't keep up," it said. "They're too strong." But then she remembered the countless mornings she'd spent running alone, the hours of drills, the sacrifices she'd made. She pushed the doubt aside and dug deeper, drawing strength from every drop of sweat she'd shed. On the final lap, the leaders surged ahead, trying to pull away. Most of the other runners followed, leaving her behind. Spectators began to write her off, assuming she'd fade like so many underdogs before her, but they didn't know her. They didn't know the fire burning inside her, the hunger to prove herself. With 200 meters to go, she shifted gears. Her legs pumped furiously, her arms swung with precision, and she unleashed everything she had left. One by one, she passed the other runners, inching closer to the front. The crowd gasped as they realized what was happening. The front runners glanced over their shoulders in disbelief, shocked to see her closing in. In the final stretch, she gave it her all, surging past two more competitors to claim second place, a position that secured her spot in the National Athletics Championship. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. Then the stadium erupted in cheers. People jumped to their feet, applauding wildly. Reporters rushed toward her, cameras flashing as they shoved microphones in her face. "How did you do it?" they asked. "What's your secret?" She smiled, still catching her breath, and replied simply, "I believed in myself, even when no one else did." Back home, the reaction was electric. Those who had doubted her were stunned into silence. The shopkeeper proudly displayed a newspaper clipping of her victory in his store window. Teenagers who once mocked her now talked about her with admiration, calling her the girl who proved everyone wrong. Even the old boxer who had shared his story with her stopped by the park to congratulate her, his dog wagging its tail excitedly. But amidst all the attention, she remained humble. Winning the regional trials wasn't the end goal. It was just another step toward the dream she'd held onto for so long. Now, she had her sights set on something bigger, the national championship. And as she stood on the podium accepting her medal, she knew she was ready to face whatever came next. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. The competition at the Nationals would be fiercer than anything she'd encountered so far. But she didn't care. Every challenge, every obstacle, only made her stronger. She had proven to herself and to the world that she belonged on that track, and nothing could take that away from her. Qualifying for the National Athletics Championship felt like stepping into a whole new world. For the young woman, it wasn't just about running faster or jumping higher. It was about proving herself on a stage where everyone expected her to fail. The regional trials had been tough, but this was another level entirely. She knew she'd be up against athletes who had spent their entire lives training under elite coaches, with access to cutting-edge equipment and nutrition plans tailored to perfection. Meanwhile, she still relied on her worn-out shoes, homemade meals, and the same quiet park where she'd trained alone for years. News of her qualification spread quickly, not just in her town but across the country. People were fascinated by her story, the underdog from nowhere, the girl who trained alone and somehow managed to beat seasoned competitors. Some admired her grit, while others dismissed her as a fluke. She got lucky at the regional trials. They said, "There's no way she can compete at nationals." Even back home, skepticism lingered. A few people congratulated her, sure, but many still whispered behind her back, convinced she'd crumble under the pressure of such a high-stakes event. But she didn't let any of that get to her. If anything, the doubt only fueled her determination. She reminded herself daily why she started this journey: to silence those who thought she couldn't succeed, and to prove to herself that she could achieve greatness on her own terms. With the national championship just weeks away, she threw herself into training harder than ever before. She began studying videos of past champions, analyzing their techniques frame by frame. How did they position their arms during sprints? What was their stride length? How did they pace themselves through each lap? She absorbed every detail, incorporating what she learned into her own style. She also started visualizing success more vividly than ever. Each night before bed, she imagined standing on the podium, hearing the roar of the crowd, feeling the weight of a gold medal around her neck. These mental rehearsals gave her confidence, helping her stay focused even when the odds seemed stacked. Against her dad, her routine became almost monastic. Every morning, she woke up before sunrise, ate a simple breakfast of eggs and toast, and headed to the park. She ran laps until her legs burned, practiced starts over and over again until her reaction time was razor sharp, and worked on her core strength using exercises she'd taught herself. In the evenings, she stretched meticulously, taking care of her body so it could handle the demands she was placing on it. There were days when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, but she pushed through, reminding herself that every ounce of effort brought her closer to her goal. As the championship drew nearer, excitement and nerves began to build. On the day of the event, she arrived early, dressed in the same plain tracksuit she'd worn during the regional trials. Around her, other athletes strutted confidently in branded uniforms, surrounded by coaches and support staff. They chatted animatedly, laughing and joking as if they already knew they'd win. She, on the other hand, sat quietly in a corner, focusing on her breathing and mentally preparing for the race ahead. When it was time to step onto the track, the stadium buzzed with energy. Thousands of spectators filled the stands, waving flags and chanting slogans. Cameras flashed, capturing every moment. Officials called out the runners' names one by one, introducing them to the roaring crowd. When her name was announced, there was a noticeable dip in enthusiasm. Some sections of the audience booed softly, while others laughed outright, clearly unimpressed by her lack of fame or flashy gear. But she blocked it all out. All that mattered now was the race. The starting gun cracked through the air, and the runners exploded off the line. From the very first second, she stuck to her plan. While some sprinted too hard too soon, burning through their energy reserves, she maintained a steady pace, staying near the middle of the pack. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her focus razor sharp, counting each stride and monitoring her breathing. By the halfway mark, fatigue began to set in. Her legs screamed in protest, and her lungs felt like they were on fire. Doubts crept into her mind. Can I really do this? Am I strong enough? But then she remembered all the mornings she'd trained alone, all the time she'd pushed through pain because giving up wasn't an option. She gritted her teeth and dug deeper, drawing strength from the countless hours she'd invested in this moment. With 400 meters to go, the leaders surged ahead, trying to create distance between themselves and the rest of the pack. Most runners followed, but she stayed patient, sticking to her strategy. Then, with 200 meters left, she made her move. Her legs pumped furiously, her arms swung with precision, and she unleashed everything she had left. One by one, she passed the other runners, closing the gap between herself and the front runners. The crowd gasped audibly, shocked by what they were witnessing. Spectators jumped to their feet, cheering wildly as she surged forward, inching closer. To the lead dot in the final stretch, she gave it her all, pouring every last bit of energy into her sprint. Her vision blurred, her muscles burned, and her breath came in ragged gasps, but she didn't stop. As she crossed the finish line, the electronic board lit up with her name in first place. For a split second, the world seemed to freeze. Then, the stadium erupted in cheers. People clapped, whistled, and shouted, unable to believe what they'd just seen. Reporters swarmed her, shoving microphones in her face and firing questions at her. How did you do it? What's your secret? Did you expect to win? She smiled, still catching her breath, and replied simply, I believed in myself, even when no one else did. Back home, the reaction was electric. Those who had doubted her were stunned into silence. The shopkeeper proudly displayed a newspaper clipping of her victory in his store window. Teenagers who once mocked her now talked about her with admiration, calling her the girl who proved everyone wrong. Even the old boxer who had shared his story with her stopped by the park to congratulate her, his dog wagging its tail excitedly. But amidst all the attention, she remained humble. Winning the national championship wasn't the end goal, it was just another step toward the dream she'd held onto for so long. Now, she had her sights set on something bigger, inspiring others to chase their dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed. And as she stood on the podium accepting her gold medal, she knew she was ready to face whatever came next. This victory wasn't just hers. It belonged to anyone who had ever been told they weren't good enough. And nothing could take that away from her. The day after her stunning victory at the National Athletics Championship, life in her small town changed dramatically for her and for everyone around her. People who had once laughed or dismissed her as a dreamer were now lining up to congratulate her. The same streets where she used to run alone, ignored or mocked, were suddenly filled with cheers. Strangers waved at her, kids ran alongside her during her morning jog shouting, "You're amazing!" And shopkeepers greeted her warmly, offering free snacks and drinks. It was overwhelming but also deeply satisfying, not because of the fame and attention itself, but because it showed how far she'd come. When she returned home from the championship, a massive celebration awaited her. The entire town had turned out to welcome her back, holding banners that read, "Our gold medal hero, and we're proud of you." Cars honked their horns, music played loudly, and people clapped rhythmically as she walked through the crowd. For someone who had spent years training in solitude, this sudden outpouring of love and admiration felt surreal. But instead of letting it go to her head, she smiled graciously, shaking hands and thanking everyone for their support. Later that evening, sitting on her porch under the stars, she reflected on everything that had led her to this moment. She remembered the early mornings when no one else was awake, the endless hours of practice that left her body aching, and the countless times she questioned whether all her effort was worth it. She thought about the laughter, the ridicule, and the doubt, not just from others, but sometimes from within herself. And yet, here she was, a national champion, wearing the gold medal she had fought so hard for. But winning wasn't just about personal glory for her. Deep down, she knew her journey meant something bigger. She wanted to inspire others, especially those who felt overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed to chase their dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed. That's why, when reporters asked her what message she wanted to share with the world, she didn't hesitate. If you believe in yourself and are willing to put in the work, nothing can stop you. Don't let anyone tell you your dreams are too big. Her words resonated far beyond her hometown. Videos of her races went viral online, racking up millions of views. Social media buzzed with hashtags like #BelieveInYourself and #GoldAgainstAllOdds. Messages poured in from people across the country and even other parts of the world telling her how her story had inspired them to keep going despite challenges. A young boy wrote to her saying he wanted to be a runner like her someday. The woman shared how watching her race gave her the courage to pursue a career change she'd been afraid to attempt. Another fan said her determination reminded him not to give up on his goal of starting a business. It wasn't long before invitations started coming in, from schools asking her to speak at assemblies, from sports organizations wanting her to mentor young athletes, and even from companies hoping to feature her in advertisements. At first, she was hesitant. She didn't want fame to distract her from her purpose. But then she realized these opportunities could help amplify her message. So she accepted some offers, traveling to different cities to share her story and encourage others to push past fear and self-doubt. One event stood out in particular, a visit to a rural school where resources were scarce, much like her own upbringing. As she stood in front of a group of wide-eyed children, many of whom wore patched-up clothes and carried tattered notebooks, she felt a lump form in her throat. They reminded her so much of herself, hungry for opportunity, but unsure if they deserved it. She spoke to them honestly, sharing her struggles and triumphs without sugarcoating anything. Life won't always be fair, she told them. People might laugh at your dreams or try to bring you down. But none of that matters if you refuse to give up. The only person you need to prove anything to is yourself. Afterwards, several students approached her shyly, asking questions about training, goal setting, and overcoming failure. One girl, barely 10 years old, handed her a crumpled piece of paper with a drawing of a runner crossing a finish line. "This is you," the girl said softly. "Thank you for showing me I can do anything I set my mind to." In that moment, she realized her impact extended far beyond medals and accolades. She was planting seeds of hope in hearts that needed it most. Back home, she continued training as diligently as ever. Winning nationals hadn't quenched her thirst for excellence. It had ignited an even greater hunger. Her sights were now set on international competitions, including the prestigious World Championships. Though qualifying would require even more sacrifice and discipline, she welcomed the challenge. After all, she had already proven that hard work and belief could overcome any obstacle. Her daily routine remained largely unchanged. She woke up before dawn, laced up her trusty shoes, now held together with duct tape, and headed to the park. She ran lap after lap, visualizing future victories while staying grounded in the present. Occasionally, neighbors joined her for part of her workout, inspired by her example. Some brought their kids along, turning her solo sessions into mini community events. Seeing others find joy in movement made her smile. It was proof that her journey was creating ripples far beyond what she'd imagined. As months passed, talk of her potential entry into the World Championships grew louder. Locals followed her progress eagerly, cheering her on at every step. Even the skeptics from her past admitted they'd been wrong about her. "I never thought she'd make it this far," one man confessed during a town meeting. "But now, she's our hero." Finally, the day came when she qualified for the World Championships. Standing on the starting line among elite athletes from around the globe, she felt a mix of nerves and excitement. This time, however, there was no trace of doubt. She had already proven herself, not just to the world, but to herself. When the starting gun fired, she surged forward with confidence. Her eyes locked on the finish line ahead. Though the race was fierce, she gave it her all, finishing in an impressive position that earned both respect and admiration from global audiences. While she didn't take home another gold medal, she walked away knowing she'd done her best, and that was enough. More importantly, she had solidified her legacy as someone who defied expectations and inspired countless others to do the same. Years later, when people talked about her, they didn't just remember the championships or the medals. They remembered the girl who trained alone, who refused to listen to negativity, and who proved that dreams are worth fighting for, even when no one believes in you but yourself. Her story became a beacon of hope, reminding everyone that greatness isn't defined by resources or circumstances. It's defined by resilience, determination, and unwavering belief. And so, she walked in with gold, not just around her neck, but in her heart.